Welcome to Daggerheart Characters. It is time for another class. I've just been going through. I really enjoy making these, and it seems like right when I think I've made the last one for now, a different idea comes into my head, and I've got to get it out on paper while it's there. So, today, we're going to look at the Cursed One, or Cursed One class. Cursed Ones are those who have gone through great lengths to make a deal with an entity who has great power. So, yeah, it's a bit warlocky, but there's, I think, a couple of different flavors here. It doesn't really matter. Same idea, right? Most commonly, a Cursed One has either made a deal in an effort to harness abilities that they never fathomed possible, or they've made this deal to try to save, protect, or even bring back a loved one. A deal made out of desperation. Either way, there are side effects when making deals of such magnitude. Cursed Ones are constantly plagued with horrible, disturbing images that cycle through their head. The only way to help alleviate the burden of these images is to share them with an unwilling participant. Although Cursed Ones do have more power, some end up wishing they could just end it all. They don't want to hold up their end of the bargain any longer. However, they find that doing so is easier said than done. I think that effectively captures what I've made with these classes. I kind of started out with Cursed first and worked my way from there, and along the way there was a mechanic that I came up with that I almost wanted to turn into the class mechanic, and also there is, and instead it's just a subclass mechanic that kind of works through your whole leveling up portion, and also I think I made a fun mechanic that's very, very much in the same mold as a warlock in D&D in terms of maybe having an extra spell slot type of idea. So the domains here are going to be Midnight and Blade, and these two domains fit together interestingly. I think ultimately it's tough to say, like, I'm going specifically for this kind of flavor in terms of specifically like, oh, I'm going to take this domain card because that's going to fit this flavor. Of course, there are domain cards that will fit certain flavors that you take this character in. However, ultimately, I think a lot of the times the choice just comes up to which one you like the best, which one's going to fit to how you're playing this character the best in terms of mechanically. There's a lot of great mechanics between the Midnight and the Blade domains to help create a character with. In terms of the what comes to my mind for an actual character in this domain, I really like the idea of this rogue who is not the typical rogue that I think we think of in a lot of terms of fantasy. This ultra sneaky, not that this character can't be sneaky, but like this ultra sneaky, smooth, suave, agile, get in and get out without being detective type of character. To me, this is more like they're going to walk in the front door, and if there's a guard there, they're just going to slash him up. They'll sneak around some corners and stuff and, look ahead. But a lot of times they'll probably choose the more brackish, the more upfront type of, infiltration style instead of trying to sneak around. Not that they might not have some abilities to sneak around, not that they might avoid contact often enough. Just, you get the idea, I think. A less sneaky, more fighting forward type of character, maybe even an assassin, but either way, one that goes through the front door and doesn't sneak up to the balcony to go into the back door or anything like that. I would imagine is more so in the mold of what this character and their abilities and these domains would lend towards. I think of like a guy who maybe he's got long hair and he uses his the lockpicking. If you were to go with being a lockpicker, if your group doesn't have a rogue or has a rogue that's not going to go that route of rogue, then you could just play it like you have those in your hair, and like maybe the rogue, maybe it's a syndicate rogue, they go to early on in the campaign, they go to like unlock something because they're the rogue, and then you're like, hey, step aside, I got this, and you rip those out of your hair because you're just always prepared for this. I think of somebody who's definitely slyborn or underborn, definitely more of a shady type of character is the primary route. Of course, there is also the route where it's somebody that's trying to save their family, and so maybe they do come from a way different background that really doesn't fit these Midnight or Blade classes. That's also the other way I think that you could play it that just came into my head, because there is that route right in the conversation, as well as one of the subclasses kind of fits that more. So, in the conversation, in the description. So, there we go. Those are just some ideas of how, my vision is for this character, and it's still not a fully baked vision. I haven't. This is a relatively fresh character that I am filming here. Starting evasion 9, starting hit points are 7. So not, once again, not the most evasive. A little bit more hardy than evasive in general here. This is actually the same as the Guardian, which this character is not necessarily a guardian of sorts, but that's how harsh I went on the evasion and starting hit points for this character. And then for the class items, I figured a family heirloom or an obscure historical artifact. So one who's kind of looking for more power might hold on to this historical artifact that they find to be really cool and neat and is important to them, and one who's maybe trying to save the loved one. You might have a little locket with your picture of your loved one, or just straight up like a family heirloom for a long time, so that kind of idea. And that's going to bring us on to the Hope feature, Visions of Dread. Let's get this whole thing in there. I think there we go. So the Visions of Dread, spend 3 Hope and make a spellcast roll against a target within close range. On a success, you share the same horrific and disturbing imagery that plagues you directly into the mind of the attack's target. Until this feature ends, you share these visions with a different creature. They are impacted by the following. In order to help me create this feature, write it, I did use the Ranger Focus. So that's where this, I believe at least, if I recall correctly, this wording should directly mirror that wording. Same with some of this verbiage for the most part there. When you attack the target, gain a +1 bonus to the attack roll. So more successful when you attack them. When you damage them, they become temporarily restrained. My original concept with this was just like in D&D, there's a few abilities where they cause fear, basically, usually, or some sort of advanced versions of fear where like you reveal your true self or something like that. That was the influence on this ability, and it built off of that. And then this idea of this horrific imagery really became a core feature, I guess, of being a cursed one for me, in terms of the evolution of this character. Third little point here. Whenever the target attempts to make an action roll, they must first roll a d6. On a 4 to 6, they mark a stress and the action roll fails. Yeah, that's pretty big. You can speak directly into their mind from any distance. Once per session, you can learn a simple fact about the target of Visions of Dread. Additionally, you can give the GM a fear to impart a false memory into the mind of the active target of this feature. There are limitations to what you can impart onto their mind, and you cannot rewrite significant chunks of time. They would be aware if a large chunk of memories were to suddenly be rewritten. Examples of things that you could do or would do include planting a seed of doubt about someone or some event, reframing or changing several words in a conversation, making them believe they've had vivid dreams of your choice, whatever those vivid dreams might be of, good or bad, giving them a single happy memory of a day they spent with their mother as a child. It's vague, but it's there. Once again, this idea of, this isn't an all-giving power, but you can keep this on a target for a long time. You could, over time, alter enough memories that, I think like the coolest thing would be that you turn what's supposed to be the big bad of your campaign into an ally over time and kind of flip that on your GM and force them to have a different big bad in the end, but just as a cool narrative thing that you might do by essentially cursing this guy, but also having access to changing some of their history in their own mind and making them a better person than they are. Also, finally, I wrote, they've met so-and-so, and they liked them, though no significant bond or friendship ever came from it. Just trying to point out, you can't just come up with this long history of a friend out of nowhere. Like, oh, yeah, you've met, so-and-so, remember them? You guys are best friends. None of that kind of stuff. But they don't have to have met. That's the part that we're faking here, right? There's just a general, oh, yeah, we've met. Try to ask for specifics. Don't poke too many holes into it, right? Then we've got our class feature. I called it Bartered Goods. Your GM earns 1 additional fear on a long rest. Because you chose this class, your GM gets an additional fear because you exist. 1d4 plus the number of PCs plus 1. That's the additional bonus fear that your GM will be getting after long rests. You can have a 6th card as a part of your loadout. This is called your packed slot. Your packed slot can hold domain cards from the domain of your choice that you have learned through this feature. Any domain cards chosen under the bartered goods feature can only be in your vault or in the packed slot. Swapping them in and out comes at the same cost as it normally would. So whatever amount of stress that it would cost to take something out of the vault, you do. It works the same that way. Choose a domain. Choose a first level card from your chosen domain and place it into your pack slot. Then at third level, you get to choose any second level or lower card, and that is now one of your packed cards, so to speak. At fifth level, any third level or lower packed card that you can add. At 7th level, 4th level or lower, and then at 9th level, a 5th level or lower card. So you end up with 5 cards, 1 slot though that you can use any of those 5 cards at any given time, and there's no bonuses or, they're not easier to swap in and out. You cannot put any other cards in your pack slot. Also, each of these cards may be swapped with the card in your pack slot no differently than you normally would. Move a card from your vault into your loadout. So there we go. Covered all my bases, I believe, here, hopefully, to make this work as intended. I think that's pretty fun there. Get an extra ability at your ready there. And then you obviously can switch it out too. Curse 1, subclasses. Choose either the desperate or the greedy subclass. Once again, I wasn't good at naming these subclasses, so I am open to suggestions. Just as I'm always open to feedback in terms of balance. If you've taken these out for a test ride, that would be awesome. Let me know what worked, what didn't work, what was out of balance. I'm always open to those kinds of things. I do my best to create something balanced, but of course, without playtesting it a bunch, can't know for sure. But there is a bunch of balanced material for me to draw inspiration from, at least, which is what I do try to do more often than not. Let's look at this desperate subclass. Also, if you like this stuff while we're at it, like it, comment, subscribe, let me know, more importantly, let YouTube know so that I can let other people know about this content. If you don't like it, then, I apologize for wasting your time. Play desperate if you want to force success by feeding fear to the GM. That is my little write-up there. Spellcast trait is going to be finesse for both of these subclasses. And for this subclass, your onboarding feature is a symbiotic relationship. Once per long rest, during a short rest, you can give the GM a fear, that should be capitalized, in order to take an extra short rest move. So you get something, they get something. There we go. Specialization feature. A simple request. Once per rest, roll your duality dice. If you roll with hope, you gain a hope. If you roll with fear, the GM gains a fear. If you critically succeed, you gain 2 hope. So odds are in your favor, but not by much. A good friend. Once per rest. When an ally within far range makes an action roll that you can mark a stress to ensure the roll succeeds. If the roll succeeds, you can use this feature again prior to a rest. If the roll fails, it becomes a success, and you cannot use this feature again until after a rest. So there is a element of this will work once, some way or another. This feature does not change a roll with fear into a roll with hope, or vice versa, a roll with hope into a roll with fear. It just changes it from a success, from a failure to a success, which is nice, I think. And then for your mastery features, we have very sneaky. You gain an amount of cloaked dice equal to your spellcasting trait. You can expend one of these cloaked die to become cloaked. While you are cloaked, which is a condition, movement from close range requires an agility roll of 13. So you are going to be, basically, you're behaving as if you're moving from far while cloaked. On a failure, you lose the cloak condition. Sorry. But if you failed with hope, you can give the GM a fear to turn the roll into a success instead. And when you succeed on an attack while cloaked, add a d20 to your damage roll. So it's a form of sneak attack, right? With a couple of differences to it. Gimped a little bit in some ways, but also offers you really nice high side on in the instance where you're going to be attacking. And then the pain never ends is the final feature here for this subclass mastery feature. Minor damage cannot cause you to mark your last hit point slot once per long rest when you would mark your last hit point slot. Instead, you can give the GM a fear, just feeding the GM fear. If you do, you do not mark your last hit point slot. So you can withstand once per long rest any kind of hit that would cause you to mark your last slot, and then you are at your last slot, because that's what it says, right? When you would mark your last slot. So you do not mark your last slot. So now you're down to one last slot because of this or because of any other reason. Well, don't worry, any kind of minor damage is not going to force you to mark that last slot either. And this is where that flavor came in of, like, you're trying to die, right? You're trying to give yourself up, and the force of this entity just won't allow it, because they're feeding off of you, right? They're getting fear from you. It's kind of the idea. The GM is this entity that you have made this deal with, essentially. Of course, you do not have to flavor it that way. Actually, I don't flavor it that way. That would be way too weird. But meta-wise, that's kind of how this is working. The GM doesn't want you to die. You're feeding them fear. Although, hopefully this character is strong enough, too, that you're a bit of a thorn in their side. Anyways, let's move on to the greedy subclass. Play the greedy subclass if you want to feed off of your allies to help compensate for the deal that you made. So you're not going to be you're not going to be feeding the GM. Instead, you're going to be stealing from your allies a little bit here. And I think this is some fun stuff here with this. Here is I had this as a mastery trait. It worked differently. Actually, I had it so you could accept a scar in order to wipe the entirety fear pool of the GM, which I thought was fun, and then you'd get a bonus for doing so. And you could do this whenever, an unlimited amount of times, whatever, and you got these bonuses, and the idea was just that, like, you accept these stars, but you get scars and you get stronger with it. That was part of the idea, at least. I do miss the idea of clearing the fear, but in order to onboard this as a foundation feature, I just have it every time that you would normally, or could potentially, specialize, or actually I'm going to change it so is if you do specialize, or if you do get masteries, that's when these two onboard. But this is how it works. You begin the game with a scar. You're going to begin with 5 hope. However, you're going to have an extra hit point slot and an extra slash slot. Let me know, do you think, is that enough? I could have one more. That's how it originally was. You would gain, but because this is going to happen 3 times, or can happen 3 times, and you're going to be gaining other things, I don't know. But you're going to take another scar. At 5th level, you gain +2 bonus to your damage thresholds, gain a +2 bonus to an experience, or a +1 bonus to 2 experiences. You get to do both of those things. And then when you decide to take a mastery in this class, you gain 1 hit point slot. You can choose any 2 of these. You can gain a hit point slot and gain a stress slot, or gain a +2 bonus to your damage thresholds, or gain a +2 bonus to an experience, or a +1 bonus to your experiences. Now, what I do think is nice about gaining this bonus to these experiences, if you're somebody who is not like a big experienced person, which I think you should, you got to embrace the experiences because they're actually a really cool feat. But because we're losing hope, that becomes a more valuable resource to us, and we're going to have some ways to gain some hope too. But in this instance, now, when you call upon these experiences, there's they're going to be more valuable as well, so it makes it more worth spending one of your more limited supplies of hope, because you're getting a bigger bonus when you do so. So I just think that that's a nice balancing feature, in a sense, of making your experiences more valuable, along with making, of course, other things more hardy. And then the other foundation feature is you are a pain in the... Once per rest, you can mark a stress of an ally within close range. They do not get a choice with this. Of course, I would talk to them. And you can clear 2 stress slots of your own. So, steal a stress, turn it into 2 is the idea, once per rest. That's bring us on to the specialization features. It used to be a pain in the, and this guy was the 2 starting features, but I had to change things around. For the specialization feature, first one here, Life Force Thief. Make a spellcast roll against a target within close range. On a success, you can mark 1 stress slot. If you decide to mark 1 stress slot, then the target marks 1 hit point slot. If it's their last hit point slot, they can choose to mark 2 stress slots instead. If you choose to mark 2 stress slots when you do this, then you apply the effects of the first stress slot, the first stress slot that you spent, and in addition, you can clear 1 hit point slot on yourself, of course. And then mark 3 slots, apply all of the previous effects here, and the target is now permanently vulnerable. They cannot clear the vulnerability. So I think that's a pretty cool feature. I did not limit its usage because it's a limited resource. There should be a lot of things pulling at your usages of stress with this build regardless. So that's why I didn't do that. I think 3 stress is a pretty hefty cost to, in most circumstances, make a creature vulnerable that you're going to be killing anyway, so the fact that it's permanent doesn't matter too much. But let me know if you disagree with that. This is in line with a slightly stronger feature, but it's more expensive to use it in this instance. So, and the feature that this is in line with is also an unlimited amount of usages per rest. So that's why I think it's okay. And then you got this guy. Once per long rest, you steal a hope from an ally within close range. Your ally loses a hope, you gain 2 hope. That's the mechanics of it, right? So there you go. This is a way. You're down to what? Now you're down to 4 hope, and you'll soon enough probably be down to only 3 hope that you can hold on to. So having a way to quickly, gain 2 hope, I think is important to this build, and hopefully you've got some nice enough allies that they're willing to do that, but they don't have to be willing technically. And then you've got your mastery feats. Rapid Retribution. When an attack made against you from within close range would deal damage, you can mark 1 stress and damage the attacker 1 threshold lower in return. So if that's not clear, if the incoming damage was greater than your severe damage threshold, the attacker takes major damage. If the incoming damage was greater than your major damage threshold, the attacker takes minor damage. And then we also have a stressful economy. Once per rest, you can convert 1 stress into 1 hope. So another way to at least get yourself some quick hope, because you can't really bank it too much. But at least you can spend a different resource to turn it into a hope. I think that all works out pretty nicely and makes up for a little bit of the pain that you're having to deal with, but also puts more stress on your stress. So I think that works as well to, you have to make choices with your stress and how you're going to use them, and there are a lot of domain features that do ask you to use your stress between the Midnight and the Blade domains, as well as, several that ask you to use Hope. So limiting that as a resource is definitely something that you have to think about when you're making your build of how many of those options you're going to take if you were to take this class. But this subclass, I should say, the greedy subclass. So that is it for this class. Let me know what you think of it. I think in the end I came up with something pretty fun and unique to try to play. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Bye-bye.